we're live here with Whatley from Actionable Insights, and as part of our 3 questions with a pro, which is something that we'll get into, you guys participated in releasing this Silica Exposure and the regulatory evolution of that. So that's definitely something I wanted to touch on. Well, and so you guys, you have the Exactimate training, and as far as like innovation goes, like Matterport, and then you have your treasure trove of digital assets there at Actionable Insights. And I guess, this would be part of that paradigm, the white paper. The thing that kind of grabbed my attention, so, at 9 to 5, we do asbestos abatement, and that often intersects with silica exposure. It's funny, I can remember when I got into the industry, we had contemplated starting an asbestos division, right?
Yeah.
But we thought, well, in theory, you're working yourself out of a business because it's not like mold where it's ubiquitous and it's always going to come back.
Yeah.
Asbestos, in theory, there's a limited amount of it out there, and we
That's
need
right.
to get rid of it, but we still haven't tapped that bottom yet. One of the interesting things about silica is it's in everything. And so, when you go to the asbestos trainings, you see how at the factories, nobody was wearing respirators. There was no dust suppression, no water suppression, no capture systems, those kind of things. And obviously that led to a lot of, the element itself causes problems, but the environmental controls around the industry were incredibly low, and obviously there's a lot of lawsuits about whether that was known or unknown.
Yeah.
But in modern day, we see that the same thing. You walk by a construction site and somebody's cutting into concrete, whether it's with a handsaw or a walking behind saw, and there's just this plume of dust, right? And so anything, this isn't necessarily from a verifiable source, but I was talking to somebody that has friends that work in coffee, and they're having the same thing there. If you're exposed to excessive amounts of dust of anything, right?
Yep.
And not wearing respirators, no environmental controls, no dust suppression, it's going to cause problems,
Yep.
So it's almost like we do this to ourselves if we're not putting people in the proper PPE. So I guess that's maybe the question I wanted to ask and pose to you when I reached out was, what kind of drove writing this paper? And you partnered with Kevin Hussey out of United Fire and Water and Rachel Stewart from Titan Restoration. What kind of led to writing the paper, and what were you seeing even pre, that led to writing this?
Well, around the time when we set out to write this, NPR was just starting to launch some stories around silica, its exposure, some folks that were really sick with silicosis. Some of those that have been most effective actually worked in granite prefab countertop, right? And they're cutting it all day in a warehouse, and they're just tore up. And that's now we're recognizing the folks in the field that you and I are more familiar with, even miter cutting that or making a cut for a bottom mount sink. There's nothing dustier. I can remember coming into job sites with homeowners that were pissed because all of their cabinets, and I can just remember opening up a sink drawer and just being buried with the silica dust
Super
fine, right?
Yep.
And I remember going, whoa, and I wasn't wearing probably the adequate PPEs because as sensitive to asbestos as I had actually pursued my DOSH license. I actually got my DOSH license and earned that after $30,000 in consulting fees and a year and a half of filing paperwork. I also got it revoked 2 weeks later, which is an interesting segue. We did nothing wrong, but this is like bureaucracy at its finest. The state of California issued something that you couldn't have a DOSH license unless you had a C22, but you couldn't sit for the C22 unless you had a DOSH license.
Oh, geez.
I actually flew to Sacramento twice to help develop the test for the asbestos test, and they wouldn't let me sit for the test that I helped create. So you can imagine the scathing email that I sent to the powers that be when I got my license revoked for doing absolutely nothing. But that's bureaucracy at its finest. Here's the point, John. I myself didn't know that silica was awful for us. I experienced myself and probably unknowingly a lot of my team members over the years to Silica. Probably not in fantastic amounts because I was never in the granite business, but
Right.
by auxiliary, it certainly happened. We were good about it whenever we were cutting drywall, but we were less cautious when we were cutting granite. And I always
Sure.
took a certain amount of pride in keeping my team safe. I took a certain amount of pride in restoring and billing to keep my
Yeah.
team safe, but
Yeah.
I really went out of my way to make sure that, hey, this personal protectment, it exists for a reason. We can bill for it, use it, so on,
Yeah.
right? I didn't think about silica. So I thought it was my obligation as somewhat of a steward of the industry to go, perhaps we should put this thing together. So out on Exactimate Ninjas, which is one of the Facebook groups that's owned by Actionable Insights, there was a lot of talk around silica at that time. And so Kevin Hussey brought up, hey, Whatley, I want to write a white paper.
Yeah.
Rachel Stewart, she is the editor-in-chief of Actionable Insights. So
Oh, wow.
everything that's published and like formal, she reviews and proves and so on. She's an amazing writer, a real talent.
Yeah.
And so we just came together to knock this thing out. So Kevin did a lot of the copy, and then Mateus Abundanza, he did a lot of the design work under my direction.
Yeah.
So those
It's a
vectors in
slick.
there are pretty sexy, right? Like
Yeah. Yep.
we
Very slick.
put a lot of time into that. Just because we wanted to visually represent,
Right.
how large those silica particles were, because I think that's how a lot of my students have traditionally learned, right? And so I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of make that jump off the page for them that this is real. And so now to see that the cases are flowing about silica exposure and those with silicosis and alike, I feel like we were a bit out ahead of it. And I think this is going to become a larger and larger issue, John. I think that asbestos might even be a bit overblown in North America. Chrysotile asbestos rarely leads to um, mesothelioma, right? Maybe asbestosis, but those are straight barbs. They're not like trisotile that are the curved barbs out of Australia. The blue stuff what'll really take you out, but nobody wants to make an argument over this level of asbestos or this kind of asbestos is
Sure.
safe or not. But at least we're aware of it. With silica, I don't think a lot of us were aware of it. And so I'm
Yeah.
grateful that we got that out there. We got people thinking about it. And then when we published an update to the glued down flooring insight sheet for diamond grinding, I think we did some great work there at
Yeah.
Actionable Insights, because that's when you're exposed to a lot of friable. Uh, Somebody out there is going to be like, well, that's not friable, whatever. I don't know. But when you're diamond grinding, you're exposing a lot of silica, right? Any reasonable person would agree to that.
Everything. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And so we smoothed the way for some guidance for how would you invoice for a reasonable amount of PPEs, right?
Mm.
On a repair side, because I think paying for PPEs on a repair estimate is like, we're
Yeah.
not paying for,
Can't be.
well,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think that we helped with the white paper, like, here's the guidance around it, here's the
Yeah.
regulatory environment, and then here's how to bill for it. And it also helped solidify our relationship with OSHA. So OSHA has been speaking at actionable events for the last 5 years,
Well.
and OSHA pushed us to publish that as well. And so we
Well.
were in direct collaboration with them. They didn't want to be named on it. It got like really complicated
Sure.
with if they were named on it, but we did our very best to check in with them along the way. And they have been enforcing in Southern California quite a bit. So, I mean,
Yeah.
issuing fines. So it's
Yeah.
definitely real for restorers in California. Several of those in our network have been actually fined for silica exposure.
Well, that's what I was listening to another podcast on the topic and looking through your report as well. It's like 675,000 workplaces or something like that, and are affected because it's so prevalent. It's in
Hmm.
sand, metal, cements, and glass, ceramics. So almost any surface you're cutting into, it could be present. The origins of Actionable Insights, as far as you guys meeting together and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're approaching it,
Right.
these are best practices. And I think you guys are continuing that with your digital assets, and then things like the Silica Exposure paper, which are educational in nature, right? And more best practices.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's our give back, buddy. Those are free. We just like
yeah,
to get those out
yeah,
there. We are publishing one, every 6 months or so, but they take a lot of work.
yeah,
But Rachel and I do enjoy turning out that content, right? And
yeah,
making sure we're thinking about the right things. But
yeah,
I'm glad that you picked that up, that spirit's coming through. Like with no
yeah,
particular bias, we're like, hey, this seems real.
Yeah.
and this is the regulatory environment around it, and here's how one might react to it.
Yeah.
So
You have to
I like
take.
to think that we've gotten a lot more people thinking about silica than
Yeah.
they were 18 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you mentioned, people are actually facing cases of it, right? And you're hearing of actual legal being brought against restorers specifically,
This
or
seems contrived, but an hour and a half ago, my business partner showed up in my office, and he sat right at that desk to my left, your right, and
yeah,
he's like, "Yeah, so we just got subpoenaed." I'm like, "Oh God, like what is this, right?" And I've I took a certain amount of pride. Like, I never sue anybody. I don't
yeah,
have these problems like with
yeah,
seeing through liens, and so I'm like, "Why are we getting subpoenaed? Like, what the hell is going on?" It's like, actually, it's not a bad thing, at least for us. So a flooring contractor, well known in California, not that doesn't serve the restoration ecosystem as much as they're on TV and they kind of serve like regular residential, right?
yeah.
Um, we did emergency pack out co. Did the pack out for in preparation for the flooring to be replaced.
Okay,
When they did the flooring, they diamond ground the slab, as I was mentioning earlier, and they dusted out the entire property.
okay.
And although that was just annoying to the policyholder, it became especially an issue when two of the kids came down
Oh,
with silicosis. And so they are still dealing with that. They're now asthmatic, so on. It's a problem. And so they filed suit against that flooring contractor. And
wow.
since we did the pack out, we got subpoenaed and so on for, they want the Matterport tours that we've done. Emergency Pack Out Co. fortuitously does a pre-mitigation and post-mitigation scan on every loss. So we actually have a 3D rendering of the property before and after,
Where
right? And
contents were prior to, and
hmm
nice, very nice.
and so that is going to be helpful, and actually it's really elegant for us to hand that
Yeah,
over to the attorneys and like, here you go, guys.
yeah,
And we continue to host those for our clients for perpetuity as part of our value proposition. So it was nice that we were just able to hand that over, and here's our scope of work, and done deal. So we don't have a particular relationship with the flooring contractor,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we're just kind of like, here you go. But very interesting that you and I have this meeting today. And
yeah,
then just an hour and a half ago,
yeah,
he's like, Whatley, dude, we just got subpoenaed, knowing that nothing about you and I meeting,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So for anybody watching this, very real, right?
yeah,
Just hit
yeah,
me as a restorer. Like,
yeah,
luckily, I'm not at the tip of the spear here, but
yeah,
involved in a claim. And that's going to be, I mean, it's a 7-figure claim, right? This is a big
yeah,
deal, and perhaps it should be. So I think they were probably just laborers out there doing their thing, working under
yeah,
somebody's direction, nobody thinking about it. But the days of behaving that way, certainly in California,
yeah.
it's totally irresponsible. Like, and
Well,
the chickens are going to come to roost.
I'm sure plenty of people think, well, that's just California, but we all know as California goes, it tends to trickle down. So, um,
Hmm.
but
For
just
good or for bad.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
It'll take 24 months before it hits Mark Springer in Montana, but it will happen, Mark. Mark my words, buddy. It comes for you.
well, and it speaks to, I think that's it just speaks to, all in all, being proactive and innovative as far as it comes to protect, understanding the information that's available and protecting your employees, and then figuring out ways to continue to provide value and to extract value for, um, both setting yourself apart and then doing the work properly. um, I like how you said, I think you said offline, you had a quote where, the origins of actionable insights was diverse perspectives with shared objectives,
Right.
and I think that, hopefully that's a part of what our industry's, understanding the value in altogether. I mean, our origins are all independent entrepreneurs, but if we can share pieces of the puzzle, then we have a much better perspective of how to move forward. Man, I appreciate you, Watley, for sharing your time with us, and hopefully this will be the first of many conversations. So,
I like it. I had fun. Thanks for having me on.
all right, thank you.
All right, John, be good.